Chapter 574, Fail to Accomplish. Head to Gallegos to meet Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina Edwards. Klein was taken aback, nearly frowning in the process. This wasn't something he considered unacceptable, but instead a chance for him to use this face-to-face meeting to ask about matters with trite details that were cumbersome to pen down. It was possible for him to be inspired and gain information for his subsequent advancement and high-sequence potion formulas. One more friend, one more channel. Klein silently muttered this sentence before taking out a heavy gold coin. He divined if there was any danger in front of blazing Danitz. The shiny gold coin flipped into the air and tumbled down into Klein's palm, tails facing up. This implied a negative response, which meant that there wasn't much danger meeting Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina in Gallegos. Klein shifted his gaze upwards at Danitz and calmly said, "Okay. On the captain's behalf, I thank you for accepting the invitation." Danitz heaved a sigh of relief and beamed, his brows easing. Klein took a look at the wall clock and said, "I'll first head to the washroom." "Head to the washroom? You mean you plan on heading out later to buy a ticket for me?" Danitz's gaze followed Jayaman Sparrow's body as he sharply read in between the lines. After using spirit dowsing to confirm things above the gray fog, Klein washed his hands and left the washroom and said to Danitz, "Let's go." "Me?" Danitz pointed at himself. Klein put on his coat and nodded. "There's no need to, right? You can directly find Elend and get him to help us buy 2 tickets." In this rare occasion, Danitz sincerely provided a suggestion. Klein coldly swept his glance across him and didn't say a word. He wore his hat and went out the door. Danitz trembled and swallowed his second suggestion of buying fake identification documents and used Jayaman Sparrow's ability to change appearances to buy 2 tickets via official channels. He wrapped the scarf around him once again and pressed down on his cap before quickly following Jayaman Sparrow. After nearly 20 minutes, Klein pointed ahead where there was a noisy commotion. "Is it there?" That was the seaweed bar, where Danitz had failed to accomplish the purchase of scalp tickets. Yes, Danitz never expected them to circle over and was momentarily stunned. Along the way, he had roughly described his early experience. Therefore, he wasn't sure why Jayaman Sparrow would return here. Amid his thought, he suddenly had a guess as he blurted, "Are you going to seek revenge for me?" This fellow might be crazy, but he's quite nice to his friends. His act of venturing out into Banzi Harbor for Elend and the others is an example. Danitz couldn't help but reflect on the matter. Klein shot him a glance and didn't say a word. He widened his strides and walked into the seaweed bar. "There's really no need." Danitz followed behind as he weakly persuaded him. To him, if he wasn't afraid of escalating the matter, he would have baked those bunch of backstabbing bastards in cement and sank them to the bottom of the sea. The bar was noisy and lively, with local music reverberating through it, bringing about a trance-like feeling. Danitz seriously surveyed the area in an attempt to find the bunch of backstabbers, as well as the infamous pirate, Blue Eyes Meath. "That's Daniel," Danitz casually introduced the black market merchant. "What a pity that this place is just too chaotic. I've no idea if that group of people are still around." He thought with some regret. Klein traced his gaze and touched creeping hunger with his right hand. He turned his head and looked at Danitz, saying with his usual expression, "Take off your scarf." His tone was akin to instructing Danitz to buy a glass of beer. Danitz was left stunned on the spot as he wondered if he had heard wrong. Klein widened the ends of his mouth and said, "Take off your scarf. Do not make me repeat thrice." "Why?" Danitz choked back his question under the icy cold and crazy stare. He blankly removed his scarf in puzzlement, and he had a baffling feeling that the people around him were sizing him up and also recognizing him as the great pirate worth 5,500 pounds, Blazing Danitz. Klein maintained his smile that concealed madness and continued instructing, "Take off your cap. Go over and buy a ticket." In an instant, Danitz felt as though he had been struck by lightning. He nearly leaped up. "I'll be recognized." Under Jayaman Sparrow's stare, his voice became softer and softer. At this point in time, he had already understood what Jayaman Sparrow was up to. He wishes to use my worth as 5,500 pounds as bait to fish out those greedy pirates and powerhouses behind those gangs. Dogshit. To think I thought he was nice to his friends a moment ago. No, why would I even consider him my friend? This son of a bitch. Danitz kept cursing inwardly with vulgarities. He couldn't put up any resistance, since he knew how crazy Jayamon Sparrow was. This was a madman who was even thinking of hunting a pirate admiral. Danitz revealed a twisted smile. As he slowly turned his head back, he took off his cap and slowly walked towards Daniel. Around him, gazes swept past him and paused for 2 seconds before they were retracted. As the drunkards moved away from him like the receding tide, they opened a wide path for him as though the ocean was split. Upon seeing their reaction, Danitz was surprised at this turn of events despite his horror and concerns. This is the might of a great pirate. This is what it feels like to be the center of attention. Damn it, I heard someone say my name. Someone is whispering Blazing. Danitz knew he had been recognized. As he walked forward anxiously, he hung his hands down and prepared to do battle. Among the crowd, Blue Eyes Meath blurted out Danitz, Blazing Danitz. His subordinates exchanged looks and said excitedly, Boss, it's really Blazing Danitz. 5,500 pounds. Shall we attack? Meath narrowed his azure blue eyes and raised his left arm, slapping the back of his subordinate's head. You stupid ass. If Blazing Danitz were a stupid ass like you, he would have been killed numerous times. He dared to appear here because he's not afraid of being attacked. He has a powerhouse hiding behind him. Meath suddenly felt horrified as he looked around. He suspected that Vice Admiral Iceberg Edwina Edwards had secretly arrived in the city of Generosity, Bayam. Through the gaps in between the crowd, he saw a young gentleman in a black double-breasted frock coat. He wore a half-top hat and had black hair and brown eyes. He looked thin, but he had an angled face. Without any words, Meath's spiritual perception told him that this was a terrifying existence. His high spiritual perception had previously brought him numerous troubles, but it had also helped him successfully evade even more dangers. Let's go, he suppressed his voice as he ordered. Then, with the help of the patrons blocking him, he fled from the bar's back door just like how Danitz did previously. Danitz came right in front of Daniel, while shuddering in fear, before buying 2 tickets to Gallegos from a blank and horrified opponent. Even after he returned the way he came and received the signal from Jayamon Sparrow to walk out the bar, he didn't notice anyone suddenly assaulting him. Isn't it said that there are many desperados among pirates? Indeed, a last-minute and rushed trap is hardly effective. Something abnormal usually implies that something is amiss. Of course, one can use the abnormality to scare the enemy. Unfortunately. Klein pressed down on his hat before following Danitz out. At that moment in time, Danitz was loitering around a street lamp. When he saw Jayamon Sparrow walk out, he barely smiled and said, Can I wear the scarf and cap already? Haha, that group of cowards. Yes, Klein didn't stop as he sped up once he reached the other end of the street. Danitz's pupils contracted as he hurriedly chased after him and inquired, Why are we suddenly running? Klein didn't turn his head as he calmly said, Do you wish to stay here to be invited back by the mandated punishers? As he spoke, he took out a paper figurine, threw it out, and burned it to ashes. Only then did Danitz snap to his senses. Although that group of cowards didn't dare to attack him, they definitely had the courage to report him. If he was successfully taken down, they still had a chance of receiving parts of the reward. They ran all the way into a secluded alley before Jayamon Sparrow stopped. Only then did Danitz have the time to wrap his scarf properly and wear his cap. Where are we heading now? Danitz asked with a slight pant. Klein glanced at him. Find Elend. The corners of Danitz's mouth twitched, yearning to throw a fireball over. To buy tickets to the Delineus Island, Klein added as he passed through the alley. Delineus Island was the first island past the south of the Rorstad archipelago. Right, there's a ship there that heads for Gallegos. Now, with everyone's attention focused on the liners from Bayam to Gallegos, no one would imagine that we'd take a detour to Delineus Island and travel from there. Danitz followed as he was enlightened. On Tuesday morning, Klein personally helped Danitz don a disguise, making him look like a mixed-blood who wore gold-rimmed glasses. Although there was no way to use his faceless powers, it was still at least 10 times better than Danitz's own attempts at disguising himself. They successfully boarded the ship and prepared to head south to Delineus Island Harbor. The journey was expected to take 10 hours. Whoosh! The liner left the harbor and steered into the sea. Under the bright sunlight, thin clouds, and blue skies, this hybrid-powered ship silently sailed through the gentle waves amid the cold breeze all the way into the afternoon. At this moment, Klein was inside the cabin, pondering over some content in the Book of Secrets. Danitz was pacing about, thinking about how he could brag to his mates. Suddenly, their vision darkened, as though a cloud had drifted over to blot out the sun. Klein subconsciously looked out and saw that a gigantic pitch-black sailboat had appeared at some moment in time. It was nearly 100 meters long and had its sail fully opened. By the side were rows of cannons. Before it approached, it steered in a different direction, but it still made the surroundings seem to have a black sun pass by. Danitz revealed a reverent and apprehensive expression that was mixed with a longing but abhorrent look. He hissed before whispering in a dreamy manner, "Black Emperor."